Welcome to Femme Furious, a podcast where pop culture meets a feminine framing. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela, and today we are packing our bags. We are going to the cottage. We have been packing all week. Our luggage is heavy, but man, oh man, was it worth it to get here? Was it worth it to get here? Before we dive into today's episode, let me tell you how you can support and follow the podcast. You can subscribe anywhere that you get your podcasts. I know if you've listened to episodes prior, I've talked about taking the show off of Spotify, but I haven't been able to figure out how to do that yet. So until I can figure out how to do that, we're going to be on all platforms. And when I do figure out how to do that, I will give you ample time to figure out where else you will get your podcasts. But some other places where you may get your podcasts are YouTube, which this will be a full video breakdown on YouTube. If you want to see my crazy hands, me talking about things, my hands are their own characters. They're unpaid actors on this show, on this audio podcast that you're listening to, unpaid actors. You can also get full video, audio, and transcripts on my Substack or my Patreon. You can follow the podcast on Instagram or on TikTok at Femme Furious Pod. You can join my monthly newsletter, Lipstick and Lore. And of course, if you have thoughts, feelings, and opinions about anything that we're talking about, or just like in general, you want to send me just like your thoughts, feelings, and opinions in general, like I'm happy to listen. My inbox is open. That is over at femmenfuriouspod@gmail.com. But in particular, for the rest of January, we will be diving into Stranger Things every Tuesday, starting with Shock Jock, ending with the finale. I know that the finale comes out next week. I binge watched all episodes last night. We'll be going week by week still because there's a lot to dive into with these episodes of television. I don't want to miss anything. I want to be fair to each and every episode for this thing that has existed in 10 years in our pop cultural landscape. So we'll be diving into all of that. So as you do your watch, if you're not psychotic like me, where you sat down at exactly 8 o'clock on the holidays and you were like, press play and I'm not getting up until it's over. If you're not psychotic like me and you're doing your deep dive now, your watch now, it is wonderful. Send me your thoughts. Just like give me your notes, give me your cliff notes, give me your emotions. You can always reach out to me on Instagram or TikTok, but you can also, of course, send me an email. So with that being said, let us get into our chic peek at episode 6, season 1. This is the season finale of Heated Rivalry. This is your blanket spoiler warning. We are talking about everything from Heated Rivalry, episodes 1 through 6. Probably mostly talking about episode 6 today, but we might throw in some stuff from other places. We'll see how it goes, how my brainchild works as we move through. The episode title is called The Cottage. It is written and directed by Jacob Tierney. The vibe check, Siri, play Friday, I'm in Love. Feral factor, 12 out of 10. Who this episode is for: the bookish baddies, chronic yearners, the girls, the gays, and the theys who are down bad for lover boys. Here's my hot girl hot take. Do you love being happy? Do you love love? Great, because I do, and this episode was a holiday spectacular. The best gift I could have gotten, actually. Never have I been so enraptured in fictional characters and so deeply invested in their mutual bliss. The Cottage is a warm, cozy conclusion to a 6-week saga where we have all collectively yearned for these two characters to be together. And this episode carves a path ahead for our dirty little dreams to come true. Cannot wait for season 2. Looking forward to it. So normally with a femme frame, what I would do is I would take something from the episode and expand upon it for, with history and pop culture references or cultural references, whatever. However, there's simply just no other way to talk about this episode than to make the femme frame this beginning speech by Scott Hunter, because this is the emotional foundation to which the rest of the episode succeeds. And I really was thinking if there was anything else I could pull out, and I'm sure there's tons of stuff, but this is just the only thing I wanted to talk about. So here is today's femme frame. It is called Game Changers, Closets, and the Cost of Masculinity. Before I can get too deep into the femme frame, I want to read you a part of Scott's quote from this award ceremony. So he says, "I love hockey. I'm so grateful I get to do this for a living. But I also know what it feels like not to fit in. When I was a teenager, I realized that I may be the thing that hockey players like to throw around as an insult." That kind of language that I heard on the ice and in the locker room was a constant reminder that I was different. So this to me was like the centerpiece of what really stood out to me about the speech. There was a lot of beautiful things about the speech and it was really well done. We're going to talk about other pieces of it, but this is sort of what I want you to keep in mind as we go into today's Femme Frame, because Scott Hunter, last episode, brings Kip down at a very slow pace, climbs over those boards, drags him to center ice. Stanley Cup freshly won. Admirals are feeling great. The world is watching, and he kisses Kip, his boyfriend. They're not in a corner. They're not doing it in a press release. It is not later on in the night when it is safe for him to do so. It is, as Scott Hunter says, ridiculously public in the way that he comes out. And he says this in his speech, but he follows it up with, I love hockey. I'm grateful I get to do this for a living, but I know what it's like not to fit in. And this idea of loneliness is going to keep coming up in today's episode. Is sort of like, this is the call, and Ilya and Shane are the echo and the response. And it's one of my favorite parts of this episode. When Scott says that he might be the thing that players throw around as an insult, that struck my heart chords in such a profound way. I started to get really choked up at this point because that locker room language never, ever let Scott feel safe, and it never let him forget that he was different. And obviously, we are seeing this with Scott in the way that he is portraying his story, but we're understanding that by him saying this, we're getting the context of how deep this runs in this space and how unsafe it is then, not just because Shane and Ilya are rivals, but because they're in the space that doesn't make it safe to begin with. And on top of it, they have this sort of public narrative about their relationship being so against each other. And so there's like multiple layers to why it would feel unsafe for either one of these characters to come out. And we're not even adding the additional pressure of what Ilya brings up to Shane last episode, where he says, I would not be able to go home. Do you understand that? So there's just like so many different layers of playing around the safety of this thing. But this one line right here of like, I realize that I might be the thing that the other players are throwing around as an insult is a really smart, intelligent, beautiful line. And I don't know if that is like quipped from the books, because I did not read Game Changer at least yet. I read Shane and Ilya's books first, because we were in this and I knew I was going to be talking about this property and I wanted to be book aware, but I have not read all of the Game Changer series yet. So I will read them throughout the course of the year, probably when I need a little bit of a fix with my Shane and Ilya. But there is a reason why Scott's book is obviously called Game Changers. And he even says in his speech, people have thanked me for coming out. And this is important because we are realizing that visibility in sports is not symbolic to a younger audience or to somebody who aspires to be a Scott Hunter or a Shane Hollander or an Ilya Rosenov. Like, for those players, younger players who are coming into the sport, or maybe just other people who do not feel safe in whatever space that they occupy, this is oxygen to people like that. And so Scott is framed as being brave, unequivocally so, and that bravery then ripples outward. And we see that ripple outward last week when this thing happens, right? And then immediately Ilya calls Shane, I'm coming to the cottage, right? You're welcome for that, by the way. So we've got that last week and we see how it ripples out. And, again, the call and response here, I was so exhausted and so lonely. And then we'd see how these two characters who are in love get to navigate and occupy the space together instead of alone, instead of separately, which is what they've been doing up until this point. So for them, for Shane and Ilya at least, Scott's truth changes everything for them. And they even say that in this episode, but it cracks something open. It gives them permission. It allows them to take the next step. And that's why Ilya then decides to go to Shane's cottage for the summer. It is a choice that feels small until you realize how impossible it felt to them before. Now, if you are new to this space, hi, hello, welcome. I grew up in theater. And I don't mean like, hey, hi, this was my hobby. I mean, theater was my life. I went to school for it. I thought I would be on Broadway. My life panned out to be a little bit different, but it all comes in handy in the end. So I grew up in theater, which means that I grew up in a space where intimacy was the normal form of currency, especially like a physical intimacy that you have with the people that you are on stage with, and therefore have like these offstage relationships. And especially for something like theater, where you are pretty much in the same boat with these people for multiple years, especially like in high school or in college, or in a show. If you're doing like a long running show, you just develop an intimacy with these people. And this is why, by the way, I have felt like Hudson and Connor's relationship, which we'll talk about in a little bit, makes sense to me. And it's also why Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo's relationship makes sense to me. The people that do not understand these relationships, I can tell, are like not theater kids. And the people that are theater kids are like, I understand this because you don't understand what it's like to share that kind of intimacy with people until you're actually forced to be in a space where you have to do that. And so, I don't know. So growing up in theater, intimacy, whether it is physical or emotional, is like the number one form of currency, and queerness is ambient. It's like, it's just everywhere. It's like, in the words of my Lord and Savior Lizzo, everybody's gay. We don't have to think about it. At the very least, the theater space breeds a parameter of safety where nobody is panicked about closeness. My own sexual identity, which I identify as pansexual, took time to percolate to me as like this is a thing that's not maybe normal for other people, because I genuinely thought that the level of physical affection, emotional intensity, and like casual kissing with multiple different gendered people is normal, because that's what it was in theater. It was like, kiss your girlfriends, kiss your guy friends. And so like this didn't like click to me that like other groups don't do this. And it was so normalized for me growing up. Again, I did it my whole life. I was in my first play when I was in third grade. So I can't even remember a time when I wasn't doing it. Not that I was making out with people in third grade, but I can't remember a time where that physical intimacy or that physical closeness or just the way that you start interacting with people, where we would just be comfortable like laying on top of each other or holding hands. It doesn't mean the same amount of stuff because you're doing it all the time on stage. And so I think it breaks a sort of fourth wall within yourself to say like these things aren't normal, because in theater, the most normal thing that we are looking at on stage is a relationship and conversations between two people. So it's what we're interested in. It's why we write plays about this kind of stuff. And so like the physicality that comes with theater just drives a certain type of closeness that I think exists. And when I watch Heated Rivalry, it makes the contrast so stark, because the show is peeling back the curtain on toxic masculinity and what it costs men. Because for men, the most brutal insult is not incompetency or cruelty. It is desire. It is to suggest that a man might like another man is to question his worth, his power, his sense of belonging. And therefore, the most human thing that we seek out in one capacity or another, at least most people, is love. We write songs about it. We tell stories about it. We love this story, which is about love. And that love becomes the humiliation. They are being berated for being gay, right? When Scott says he's the thing that other players throw around as an insult, what he's talking about is the most innate desire that we have, which is to love and to be loved, and how that love is so diminished into humiliation, and how these characters in this universe, that are in this bubble, that don't get out of this bubble because that's their container, self-berate in one capacity or another because of these desires. And I think that the speech does a really good job of touching on that. A quick Google search confirms the quiet horror of it. There are no active, openly gay characters in the NHL, the MLB, the NBA, or the NFL. Now, there are retired players who exists. Now, there's Pride Night. There are rainbow jerseys. But there are no active players, which statistically just seems impossible because combined between all four of those sports, at a minimum, there is 3,650 players. So out of 3,650 people, not a one of them is gay, not a one of them is bisexual. It just feels to me like when the Republicans say that they're so anti-gay and then like Grindr just breaks every time that there's a Republican event. That's how this feels to me. But I can't, I'm not saying that they're conservative. I'm just saying that it means that this is obviously quietly enforced, whether that is the pressure from the locker room and the toxic masculinity that exists in the locker room, or whether that is coming from the top of these organizations down through the teams. Visibility is clearly welcomed because, again, they have Pride Nights and they have merch and all of this stuff, but it's welcomed as branding. It is not necessarily welcomed as a reality for the sport. And it's clearly punished. Institutions love queerness as long as it does not speak out loud. And so the timing of the story matters because we're getting Scott and Kip's story. Their kiss is happening in June of 2017. The Cottage exists in July of 2017. And we'll talk a little bit more about timing as we go through the episode. So this story right now that we're getting it is happening in 2017. It's Canada, yes, but it is also during the first Trump presidency. And this is a period of time where, with rising fascism and emboldened right-wing extremism, it is a cultural moment where being visibly queer felt more increasingly dangerous. So even if the MLH, which is like the Heated Rivalry Universe Hockey League, right? Even if that was more open, the NHL does exist, and the players that exist in that space are real people. They do cross borders. They do read headlines. They certainly must be seeing our response to the show. And I know the NHL has seen the response to the show because the NHL has leaned all the way the fuck in. So has no problem saying like, hey, this is going to bring in new hockey fans. No, that's not the point. The point isn't for you to bring in new hockey fans. The point is for you to open your parameters of what is safe for your players to be able to express within themselves. That you need to cultivate an environment that is safe for your gay or bisexual or bi-curious or whatever players to be able to feel like their job or their reputation would be harmed by them coming out. This kind of safety is not just determined by a statement by the league or the league playing a tattoo song to show that they're culturally relevant. It is determined by who in these organizations might actually make some moves or make some structural changes within the league when the cameras are turned off. Now, in this, I cannot stop thinking about Hudson and Connor, the actors, not the characters. They obviously have a ton of on-screen chemistry. We love it, okay? But their off-screen intimacy, their chemistry, and the way that people cannot seem to stop speculating about their sexuality or about their relationship because of how physically close they are is also very telling. Because while we want these stories and while we've been foaming at the mouth for them, we can't seem to separate character from actor because of the way that they share the space. And by the way, this obviously also happens with Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. People are like, you can't be this close or have this much intimacy or interact the way that you do unless they're romantically involved in some way. And again, that's how I know that these people have not done theater. But even then, women sharing physical intimacy reads as more natural, even expected from us, in women-centered spaces. And when men do the same, which Connor and Hudson clearly have been, they've been sharing their physical intimacy, and they have every right to. Whatever their relationship is, which is none of our business, but as two people who have put out that this relationship is platonic to them and that they just want to express their love and their friendship and their camaraderie in this way should be normalized, should be something that we accept, should be something that we're like, okay, well, that's them and I operate different. You know, men sharing a physical intimacy as friends should be something that we normalize as a form of healthy masculinity. But men doing this triggers alarms and suspicion and policing. And that notion alone explains so much of the fear that our characters are experiencing inside of the show. And this is why I love, women on the internet. So I saw a video on TikTok. I'm really sorry because I don't have her name and I would love to quote her directly. If I can find it, I'll tag it in the show notes. But I saw this video where she says, people are like shocked that women love the show when like women have canonically always loved romance, which is true. I posted a whole video about this myself where I said romance is the number one best-selling genre year after year. I think it was like $1.7 billion industry, if I'm like remembering that statistic correctly. And like the next one down is thrillers and mystery and $750 million. So like a far gap between the two of those things, right? So her video talks about how women have always loved romance. And then she goes on to say, we're just not homophobic. And I think that this is true. Women understand longing. We understand vulnerability. We are not embarrassed by intimacy. And alternatively, masculinity in this like sort of toxic way trains men to treat queerness as a contamination. And Heated Rivalry refuses to let that lie. It suggests gently but firmly that love does not weaken the game, it deepens it. And I know we don't really see this maybe a ton in season 1, but we're certainly going to see this idea of love strengthening the game in season 2. And that's where I think that hope can live inside of this season, especially within this episode, because maybe this show opens a door. Maybe seeing the NHL lean in for whatever reason gives real players a little bit more confidence. Maybe someone watching the show realizes that the world does not have to end when the truth is spoken. And when they hear these people cheering on screen and off screen, and they see how viral this show has just gotten in the last couple of weeks, that people will stay, that they will support you, that they will love you through this. That, Scott Hunter can kiss his boyfriend at center ice and the sky does not fall. The game goes on changed, right? They are the game changers. That hopefully that gives somebody some confidence, even if it's a fictional character. And I think it does matter because last episode was so well received that Heated Rivalry, episode 5, I'll Believe in Anything, the episode where Scott does kiss his boyfriend, where we get this beautiful love confession from Ilya, that episode is now sitting at number 1 on IMDb, tied with a Breaking Bad episode for the highest rated episode on the platform. That is not niche success. That is not for a certain audience. That is mainstream. It is cultural. It is undeniable. It is sitting above Battle of the Bastards, which I posted a video about this. Battle of the Bastards is my favorite Game of Thrones episode maybe ever. It is sitting above that. Number 14. This is number 1. This episode of television, this episode, we'll see where that falls in the landscape of things, is number 1. So this is a show that is centered on two gay characters, queerness, a little bit of hockey sprinkled in there, but it's being embraced at the highest level in a way that's very prestige, and it feels very important in this cultural moment for us to acknowledge it because it proves something that people love to deny, that stories about queer men in sports are not risky because audiences can't handle them, or that there is no audience for this type of work. They are risky because the institutions, aka the NHL, are afraid of them. So the response to this episode shows you that when you tell the truth and when you let characters fall in love fully and openly and messily, like the way that people do in real life, that people are going to show up, that there's an audience for it, that they are going to rate it, they are going to talk about it, they are going to crown it. And that in and of itself feels like its own game changer. So I'm hoping that 2026 will prove to be like 1,000 times more gay. That shows moving forward are 1,000% more gay. All right, that's our femme frame for this week. Let's dive into our quickie. Normally I would do a slay by slay, which would be a beat by beat, for the episode. But because there's not a lot of theorizing and speculating for an episode of television like this, we'll kind of just do a quickie, okay? A quickie, we'll just kind of go through the main beats and chit-chat about them. And so let's start with, Ilya and Shane in the car. Ilya is so hot with his tank top and his hat. I don't even understand what this man has done to my brain chemistry. Okay, thank you. I will say something that does kind of annoy me, though, and I can't really explain it. I think that Hudson has played Shane perfectly to a T. Hudson is a perfect Shane. I have zero complaints, zero, about his performance except for this one small, minute detail, and it's that Shane drives with two hands. I can't explain how I know that, I just do. If you disagree with me, you can let me know. FemmeandFuriousPod@gmail.com. But I just feel like Shane's a two-hand driver. They wanted those scenes of Shane being able to hold hands with Ilya and vice versa. And I love that. And them holding hands in the car is everything to me. Them holding hands in the car is the most normal thing that they could be doing as they walk into 2 weeks of domesticity together. But I just can't explain it. Shane drives with two hands. I will also say Shane is kind of giving top energy this episode. Like, he picks his guy up at the airport. He carries his bags. He's like, your ribs are still hurt. So, Mr. Romantic, Mr. Husband material. We love him. Okay, enough gushing. I love the house. The cottage is beautiful. It's serene. We knew it was going to be. We get the scene where they're on the couch and we get the wait scene. And this is, Shane kind of poking and prodding at Ilya that he hasn't been with anybody lately. So here's what I love about this episode, and it starts right here. This entire episode is about the two of them figuring out a path forward where they can be together. And a part of that is that even though they have been in this sort of situationship for many, many years, they have not deepened their emotional intimacy. And a part of why they have not deepened their emotional intimacy is because they have a lot of insecurities and they haven't been able to address them because, once again, this world is not safe for them to have these experiences. And for different reasons, they feel this pressure. Shane has all of these brand deals. We've been getting it from the very beginning. He's got one with Rolex. He's got one with Reeboks. He's got one with Speedo. Like, we've seen him with it's not a Coke can, it's not ginger ale, but it's a Canadian brand of soda or seltzer or something like that. And so maybe it's a beer, I don't even know. So, Shane has a lot of pressure. A lot of his money is probably coming in from these brand deals. And we know that Ilya has a lot of pressure from the family side and from, being Russian. And so there's like these external pressures as well, not just to dive into the ones that are internal. And so these internal pressures that they are feeling around their relationship to each other, they need to clear the air about all of these things over the course of this episode in order for them to find a path forward together. And so we get it right here. Wait, same. Now, why would Shane be insecure about this? right? They have crossed a line in last episode. They really crossed the line at the tuna melt, but they kind of cross it again next episode where they are walking into the abyss, where they know that something about their dynamic has shifted, right? And Shane knows Ilya. You know, the two of them continuously remind each other that they know each other in different ways. And so Shane knows Ilya. He knows that Ilya needs physical touch. He knows that he's got a reputation, which we hear subtly about over the course of the season. But Shane knows that Ilya is a creature of physicality and of connection. And the thing is, like, Shane is so the opposite of Ilya in so many ways. So Shane is very discerning. Shane has a very small circle. Shane is very private. He even says it to Ilya, it's private. I keep a lot of things private. And this is true of Shane. Like, his circle is very small, and Ilya just happens to be in the folds of the circle at this point. He's no longer on the outskirts of it. And so we'll see a lot of that, a lot of Shane welcoming him into his inner circle over the course of this episode. But we also know that he knows who Ilya is, and Ilya is the opposite of Shane. Ilya has not a lot of people and support the way that Shane does. Shane has his parents, and we see him with his parents multiple times over the course of the season from the very first episode. So we know that Shane has support. Maybe they don't know that he's gay, but he certainly doesn't feel alone in this world. He certainly knows that he has a space of belonging, and Ilya doesn't. Ilya doesn't have a space where he belongs. He hates Russia. He hates his family, and he feels obligated to them up until his father dies, and that's very confusing to him. And he, loves Svetlana, but I'm not going to even say it's platonic, because obviously it's sexual to a certain degree, but he even says it last episode, like, I don't have anybody. Well, that's not true. I have Svetlana, and she loves me, and I love her, right? And then we get his confession. That doesn't even matter because I'm so in love with you and I don't know what to do about it, right? So it's so important that Shane knows Ilya and knows that they haven't been together. We're going to talk about the timeline in a second, in a few months, which is what Shane says. And this, hearing Ilya say, I haven't been with anybody since you, is validating something that feels tender and raw to Shane, which is they've had no conversations about exclusivity. He knows that Ilya is a creature of physicality and connection. And so if we go through the timeline, January 2017 is the All-Star game in Florida. Cool. That is when they have the conversation where Shane says to Ilya, I can't keep pretending like I don't like you. I think I like you a little too much. And that is where they kind of cross a line, right? We know that they have sex at that point. We also know that we get the goodbye Shane, goodbye Ilya. So they've crossed into the first name territory again because they have breached an emotional vulnerability as well as a physical one. Shane is honest about his sexuality. Ilya is honest about his family. And that is the moment that was missing from the tuna melt that allows them to go into the next phase of their relationship. So that's January of 2017. In March of 2017, that is when they have the game where Ilya texts Shane and he's like, come over for just an hour, before the game. And they hook up at that point, but then Ilya's dad dies. So we also know that while Ilya's in Moscow, they have phone sex, or FaceTime sex, but it's not physical. And they had plans to meet up in April of 2017. They had plans to meet up that evening where Shane was going to ask him to come to the cottage. However, Shane then has his accident. Presumably, which we know, Shane is out for the rest of the season. He's probably not going to away games, if he's going to any games at all. So he hasn't seen Ilya. We don't know if between April and July, whether they hooked up. We do know that they probably saw each other in June for the All-Star game. But the way that they're saying months is making me think that they haven't hooked up since March. That was the last time that they hooked up was before the game, and then Ilya's dad died, and they have not physically been able to be together until then. So now we are at the cottage. It's July of 2017. I don't know. I think it's great. So Ilya, is validating something for Shane here by being like, yeah, I haven't been with anybody else. And so they're taking a step in the right direction. They're no longer relying on the things that they used to rely on to avoid emotional intimacy and to keep each other at a distance. And so this, like, sort of addressing of an insecurity that I have and it being met with no, no, yeah, I haven't been with anybody. I know it's been months, but yeah, come, is just the first of many times that the fear of being in a relationship together and what that would mean and how vulnerable it is for these two people to be together, emotionally together, and physically because of their jobs together, we start to see that sort of quelled here, and we'll see it kind of quelled over the course of the episode. I also just want to say, like, a little note, I love Loverboy Shane. I love that he is, you know, letting his walls down. He's making jokes, he's being silly, he's giggly, he's, holding Ilya's hand, he's leading him into the bedroom. I'm just a bellboy. You can't treat the staff this way. And while both Shane and Ilya are very repressed, they do it in very different ways. And so usually Shane's expression of his repression comes out through control. It's very controlled. And to see him, over the course of the season, continuously surrender in the bedroom, right, to Ilya, but to see him sort of surrender to something that's inside of him that's a little bit silly, a little bit goofy, a little bit playful. And that has been happening over the course of the season, but he can so easily rein it in. I just love that we get to see Loverboy Shane. I think it was really, really well portrayed. We then have the bonfire, so another important scene, right? And we get another moment of insecurity here. Shane is texting Rose, and he's like, Rose is just checking in, and he confronts Ilya. He's like, are you jealous? Ilya doesn't say yes or no, but he does say, you're not so gay that you couldn't sleep with Rose Landry, right? And Shane is like, yeah, but it was a disaster. And, he makes a joke, which is what Ilya likes to do. And he's like, how bad of a disaster? Tell me how bad. And Shane is comforting him by saying, like, I'm gay. Like, Rose couldn't do it for me. I tried, but Rose really couldn't have done it for me. So that scene ends with Ilya on Shane's lap, laying down. Shane is rubbing his hair, rubbing his shoulders. And I love that in different ways we see these two people melting into the safety of their relationship. That for each time one of them sort of quells the other's insecurities and turns the noise down on it, that they're able to just relax into this relationship. And so again, Ilya is somebody who feels a lot and very deeply and represses it. And then Ilya allows himself here to be the one that is more vulnerable. He's the one that's laying on Shane's lap. He is the one that is allowing himself to be taken care of and to be nurtured in this way, instead of being the one who has to be nurturing, has to take care of his father, has to make sure that everyone has the right clothes and the right food and that the funeral arrangements are great. So we see that now he's allowing himself to be taken care of in this way. And what it would mean for them to be in a relationship is like Shane, who is so controlled, right, can relax, and Ilya, who feels so unlovable and who has been told by his family over and over again that he is othered in some capacity, whether that's his brother calling him a faggot or his dad calling him lazy, like this idea that he's never going to be enough, that he just surrenders to being taken care of by this person who makes him feel enough and who, does help him turn the noise down on that side of his brain. And so I love that we get to see that these two people melt into this relationship in this way. And so even though, okay, a couple other things about the scene that I love, obviously, we get the loon, which is from the book, stupid Canadian wolf bird, right? And Shane makes the bird call back, and Ilya, oh, you speak bird now too? And Shane goes fluently. And just the way that they can be playful together, just the way that they can acknowledge where their relationship has, stemmed from. I really love that. I also love the lighting in this episode. We get so much around light and dark in this episode, and so much of the season, right, is them hooking up in these dark spaces, these dark hotel rooms, sort of like in shame or like in shadows. And in this episode, we get so much light. And so even though it's nighttime, they are both basked in the warm glow of the fire. And, their feelings are catching flame. And we love that for them. We then have the two of them sleeping. And I thought this was so endearing. And I thought this was such a beautiful shot. Like, the imperfect way that people sleep and the realism of it, like the cadence of the breath here, as well as like Ilya's mouth being kind of like open, and how that plays into the way that they're sleeping together. I really just loved it. I thought it was just like a really beautiful shot. And again, like the sun is like filtering in lots and lots and lots and lots of light. Now they are in this relationship. They are committing to this thing. They are figuring out how they're going to do it. And like, we're flooded with light because they're happy. And the visual storytelling of it is so beautiful. It's not even just the sun or the light itself. Like, there's multiple shots in this episode of like the sun glittering on the water. It literally looks like it's sparkling. Like there's something almost magical or etheric around it. And so I really, really loved that about this episode. And I love that, when Ilya wakes up and Shane is like, good morning, and he's like, good morning, that he kind of looks at him and he goes, I like you. That's his first thought when he wakes up. I like you. When you're still in that brain fog, when you're still not completely yourself, when you're still not, one cup of coffee into the day, that you can just first thought, I like you, is so, again, endearing and charming to me, and just really good writing on how these people are deepening their intimacy over the course of this episode. Then we've got a little bit later on, Ilya sort of teases and hooks up with Shane while Shane is on the phone with Hayden. And Shane is like, why was that so hot? And Ilya goes, because you like to be bad. And again, he's not saying the fear directly, but he is saying it indirectly. You don't like me for me. You like me because there's something secretive or naughty about this. That because of our rivalry, perhaps, there's something bad about this, and that's appealing to you. And Shane comforts him and tells him, that's not what this is, you and me. Maybe it was at first, but not now, and not for a long time. So again, every single time that one of these characters brings up their insecurities over the course of this episode, the other character is like, no, that's not true. And they're able to sink deeper and deeper and deeper into their romance and their emotional connection to each other. And, of course, Ilya, being who he is, deflects with humor and a joke. But really, each moment that these boys try and reassure the other one when the insecurities come out is just paving the way for the end of this episode. So now the conversation that these two people need to have is not, are my insecurities valid? But is there a path forward? And so Ilya brings up that he is going to be a free agent at the end of next season. And Shane right away is like, you wouldn't re-sign with Boston? And Ilya says to him, no, I'm thinking about signing with the Canadian team. Not Montreal. But this is his way of saying, this is Ilya's way, who likes to ease into things, right? Do you want a tuna melt? AKA, I love you. Let's be together, right? This is Ilya's very gentle way of saying, if I played for a Canadian team, do you think that this could work long term? Is that a good idea? Do you like that idea? How do you feel about that thing? And it's his gentle way of saying, like, I'm thinking long term about this relationship. But again, still kind of like insecure about it. So later on, he brings up Svetlana and he says, I can marry Svetlana. She's an American. I would be able to get an American passport. And this is the last of the insecurities that goes out on the table, which is Shane saying, well, you're bisexual, so you could just find someone that you want to marry for real. And this is Shane's last insecurity, which is like, is this going to be enough for you? Especially knowing some of Ilya's personal goals, which is like he wants citizenship, right? Somewhere else but Russia. So the last insecurity kind of comes out here. You could find someone you want to marry for real. Knowing that as he's saying this is fucking killing him. If Ilya got married to somebody, he would be despondent, right? This would be so painful and so hurtful for him. They're so in love with each other, but they haven't said it yet. We'll get that in a moment. And that is when Ilya, once again, comes right out and starts to be indirect. And when people are indirect with Shane is a hard time. When people are direct with Shane's all in. So he says, maybe, but I have this problem. Shane's, what's his problem? He goes, I like women, and everywhere I go, I'm surrounded by beautiful women, and they love me. And at this point, Shane starts to close off a bit and starts to get emotional. This is painful for him to hear. And he's like, makes some kind of snide remark, which is what he's doing to repress, and how he's, using snide remarks or sort of snarky remarks to regain control in a conversation that is slipping away from him. Shane does this the entire season. But Ilya goes on and he says, and these women, they're so sexy and fun, but I'm always thinking about this slow fucking hockey player with beautiful freckles and a weak backhand. And he's so boring, and he drives a terrible car, and I'm always wishing that these women were him. And so Shane responds, do you want the problem to go away? And he goes, I don't ever want that problem to ever go away. And so now he's like, you don't have anything to be insecure about. I don't want to marry somebody for love. You don't need to tell me that I can marry somebody for real. I don't want to marry somebody for real. I want to marry you for real. Doesn't say that. I want to marry you for real. I just need an American passport or a Canadian passport. I just don't want to be a Russian passport anymore. That's what he's getting at. So he, Shane comes back with, don't marry Svetlana. We can figure something else out. So now, once again, okay, quite literally every other problem has been solved between these two people so far, thus far. And they need to figure out something else in order to make this relationship work. And so Shane is up thinking about it. Ilya's long gone to bed. Shane is like, can't turn his brain off, needs to find a solution to this problem, needs to gain control over this problem. And so he comes up with this solution. He wakes Ilya up. He says, you could go play for Ottawa. It's close by. You'd be 2 hours away. They need a star center, so they're nowhere near their cap, so they would be able to afford you. And the way that we'll make this work is that we'll be able to start a charity together. And as we start this charity together, we can change the narrative about the dynamic of our relationship so that we're no longer rivals, that we're working together on this thing that is important to us. And so we've developed like a more professional, working relationship. And so he's telling him his plan and he's going on, and he kind of ends this speech by saying, and one day when we retire, we can be together, like for real. Ilya says, you really think that far ahead, Hollander? And he goes, I do, about this. Like, I'm really serious about you. And, Ilya follows that up with, and is that what you want? To be together? And Shane says, so much, it scares me. And now Ilya starts getting choked up because this is what he wants. He wants a space of belonging. He does not belong anywhere. I guess he kind of belongs in the NHL, but he doesn't really feel safe to be himself. He's not out. He's not safe in Russia to be himself. He doesn't really get along with his family. He's got Svetlana, who he's got a beautiful relationship with as far as their friendship goes, but he doesn't really have a sense of belonging. He doesn't really have a community. He doesn't really have the same type of support that, Shane has. And so he belongs with Shane. There is a sense of belonging and a sense of community that he is developing with this person. After hearing his entire life that he's not worth it, that he's lazy, that, he's got to keep his mother's death a secret, that he's got all this pressure to, provide for his family and all of this stuff. After having all of this pressure on him and not feeling worthy of love and affection, he's got this person who is now saying, I love you so much that I'm thinking ahead to like how we can make this work until we can really make it work. And if you listen closely, you can hear him saying in Russian, I love you. Now, in the subtitles, it says indistinct whispering, but later on in the episode, when Ilya says this, we hear what he says. And so I think that's what he's saying here, but I don't really know because it says, indistinct whispering. But I think that's what Ilya is doing. I think he's telling him in Russian, I love you, I love you. And then he says it out loud. In English, I love you. And I just think it's so beautiful. And they, share this moment together. And then later on, once again, the insecurities kind of come out. And Shane is like, is this real? This is real though, right? This is real. They've now said, I love you. They've now shared this intimate moment out by the water with the sun setting, the water's glittering. And, Shane asks him when they're inside and they're, making love, truthfully, this is real though, right? We're not just saying these things. We're being honest with each other. We're being real. And Ilya tells him yes. And so we just keep soothing each other's insecurities over the course of this episode. Shane then suggests that they start a hockey camp. That will be the charity. And all of the proceeds will go to a mental health and suicide prevention. And this is a spoiler for the long game. So if you don't want to hear it, just, hit ahead a couple times. But that's why he asks what his mom's name is, because this will go on to be the Irina Foundation, named after Ilya's mom. And then we get this beautiful, beautiful quote from Ilya where he says, she would have loved you like I love you. And I just think that's beautiful. And it was one of my favorite parts in the entire episode. I also loved when Ilya kind of like admits to watching Shane's MTV Cribs episode. I don't know what like the ESPN version of that is, but it was like an MTV Cribs episode. And he says it twice because he says it in the beginning, but I think Shane is so nervous to have Ilya at the cottage, he doesn't really clock it. So he was like, oh, I didn't buy this property. I built it. And Ilya's like, I know. And then I think Shane is just like, do you want to tour? Like, do you want to make out? What do you want to do? I think he's so nervous in the beginning that he doesn't really pick up on that. But when, Ilya says later, like, is this where you do your yoga? And he's like, no, the producer just wanted to do that. And he's like, wait, what? You saw that? And so it just goes to show like how invested these two people have been in each other, even when they haven't been able to have the physical intimacy of being together in the same space or sharing their home together or whatever, that like they've been keeping tabs on each other's careers and what the other one is doing. And how important that is in this moment too. It again, once again, deepens that emotional intimacy that we're getting over the course of this episode. And then we have David spotting them. Shane says, we should go talk to them. And what I love about this quote, the simplicity of we should go talk to them, is they are no longer in this alone. They're in it together. And especially at a time when, the beginning of this episode starts with Scott Hunter's speech where he says, carrying this secret was exhausting and lonely. And here we have these two people carrying the secret together, and they're not alone because it's not I should go talk to them. It's we. We should go talk to them. They are in it together. And as Shane is spiraling, he's like, this is my fucking nightmare, Ilya. And Ilya is so gently, such a beautiful line. I will be thinking about this for a long time, where he says, okay, then maybe it's time to wake up, yes? He's so good at helping Shane with his anxiety. He's so good at being tender and gentle, right? We've seen this with him sexually, even in how gentle he is with him in episodes prior. But, here we have like just how beautiful it is that he can be so gentle with him in this moment and so tender. So maybe it's time to wake up from this nightmare, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a nightmare. We can just go face this thing. So I love, like, after he says this, Shane just pulls him in, and this hug is just so intimate. Two people who know each other, who love each other, who have shared things with each other, and the comfortability of that hug. And then Shane says, fuck, I'm scared. And Ilya, once again, yes, it's scary, but you're brave. And Shane's like, fuck, what am I going to say? And then he just bops his little forehead on Ilya's little forehead. And I just love that too. Like the intimacy of what it is to like let your head rest because it's heavy for a moment on your shoulders against the person that you love. And like two minds are better than one here, right? And just the intimacy of that. We've all been with someone that we love. We've all had this moment, or at least I have. And this is where Ilya says, do you want me to come with you? It was no question, I think, to Ilya. It was always designed to be that way, but I don't think Shane realizes that this is an option. And so Ilya makes it clear to him, do you want me to come with you? So they go together. They are holding hands in the car. So again, they're forging this intimacy of something that is very normal, driving together. And then I just love, like, Shane starts to doubt this whole, plan. And he's like, maybe you should wait in the car. And Ilya just gives him a look and he's like, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, come on. And just like how they've developed this type of intimacy where Ilya's like, no, that's not what we're doing here. Keep him up. Like, come on, here we go. We're going to face this thing together. And how comforting that is, to the point where Shane's like, yeah, sorry. Like almost immediately, right? He's like, yeah, sorry. Not almost immediately. It is immediately. So where the whole episode has been really, really light, lots of warm light. This scene, even Yuna standing up, it is dark. It is very, very dark. And I think this is more about Shane's emotional state than it is about the response. It's his fear. His fear is this thing that has been cloaked in shadows. And now the thing that's cloaked in shadows is his parents. His biggest fear is telling these two people who he loves, admires, and respects that he has such a wonderful relationship with this secret and, what he fears about their relationship in the wake of that thing. And so it's very, very dark when Ilya and Shane first walk in, despite the fact that it's daytime. And I just love that Shane takes the lead, but Ilya is standing there with his hands clasped in front of him like the world's goodest boy. So Yuna is like, but you hate him. And he's like, well, no, actually, I love him. And you can just see like gentle shock on her face. It's not outrage. It's just like, oh, I've so gotten this wrong about this person. And I am feeling a lot of things about it. So it just plays very subtly on her face. Like her eyes just lift, her eyebrows lift a little bit. But Shane, being who he is, immediately takes control of the situation. He's like, I love him. He rips the Band-Aid right off. And then he's like, can we just sit down and talk about this? And as soon as they sit down, the way that it is filmed is so much brighter. There's like a light on, there's light like pouring in from all of these different spaces, light from outside, and it's very warm again. But yet the first shot of the scene as we're going into the kitchen is Shane and Ilya sitting down, David sitting down, Yuna's kind of moving around and getting everybody their drinks. But the way that it's filmed is like they looked very compressed in the shot, because the outskirts of the shot are like the rest of the house, sort of like a panoramic view of the house, but they're in this very narrow space. And so that compression is almost like a little uncomfortable. So even though there's all this light now flooding in, there's still something about the way that it's shot, in that first frame at least, that feels almost very tight and uncomfortable. And so again, we can probably anticipate that that's how Shane is feeling. And for the first time since we've had this season, we've seen Shane framed between his parents multiple times. And each time there's sort of been like a growing space where Ilya belongs, right? And now Ilya's here. And so we see sort of Ilya and Shane framed in between David and Yuna. And I really loved that shot as well. I love that David says, we did not expect that you were so friendly with Rozanov. And Ilya just so gently and so kindly immediately corrects him and says Ilya. And we waited years for these two characters to say each other's first names. They were Hollander and Rozanov to each other for a very long time, and that was creating an emotional distance between the two of them, despite the fact that every single time that they got together, they were creating more and more emotional and physical intimacy with each other, to the point where we get the tuna melt and the crossing of the boundary of no longer saying the other person's last name, right? So Ilya correcting him is refusing to let his parents create emotional space from their relationship by using his last name. I'm not his rival. I'm not Rozanov. We're not on the ice. We are together. I'm Ilya. And so he's creating this emotional intimacy even with his parents just by that one switch. And David does switch. He immediately corrects himself and he goes, Ilya. So we're getting that emotional intimacy right away with his parents, that his parents are, being pulled into this mix of their support system. And then we get Yuna asking, you never let him win, did you, Shane? And Shane's so offended by this. He's like, do you ever let dad win at cards? And she's like, I'd rather die. And he's like, great. We are on the same page. But this is important because, again, if you don't want spoilers for season 2 or potentially season 3, I don't know, I guess we'll see what happens. But if you don't want spoilers for the long game, just skip ahead. This is something that, happens in the long game is, as Shane and Ilya's relationship becomes public, Shane is accused of letting Ilya win. And it's so harmful and so painful for him. And so I think we're getting like a little bit of forewarning for that, even though this does happen in the book. Just how immediately ridiculous she realizes that she's like, no, I'd rather die. And he's like, yeah, I would rather die than let, Ilya win at this thing that I am obsessed with. So then, Yuna is getting overwhelmed. She takes like herself out to have a little moment alone and like process everything that is happening. And Shane goes out there. You could just tell Shane loves his parents and his parents love him. And I actually had to pause because I was sobbing when she said, I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't tell me. I'm so, so proud of you. Please forgive me. And he starts crying and he's like, I forgive you, Mom. And just like what this means to him, that he's got people who actually support him, that his biggest nightmare, right? That Ilya's like, maybe it's time to wake up from this nightmare, that he can wake up and that he can realize that his biggest fear, which was his parents or people not accepting this thing, is actually more digestible than maybe he realized. And I think that is, sort of the second thing that changes the game, at least for Shane and Ilya, where Scott is sort of the thing that paves the way for them to decide that they can even take the chance to have at the cottage to figure out if they can be together. And Shane's parents being so accepting, over the course of this conversation and getting the clarity that they need and them, asking for the forgiveness and being supportive. That is sort of the second coming of this thing where Shane's biggest fear is that he's not going to be able to play hockey anymore, that his job, this thing that he so deeply cares about, is going to be taken away from him in some capacity or another, or ruined if he comes out as gay, especially if he comes out as gay and in a relationship with Ilya, right? And so I think that, this response from his parents is very much like a balm to this open wound that he has. And so then we continue on with the conversation, right? Yuna then presses the gas on Ilya. So you would leave Boston for Shane? And it's an immediate yes. And one of the things that I love is that there's a post on Rachel Reed's feed where she's got all of these different things about Shane and Ilya, like, Ilya's cool, Shane is not, whatever. Just a bunch of stuff. And one of them is Shane is obsessed with hockey, Ilya's not. Hockey for Ilya could have been a lot of different things. I think he's good at it. Obviously, he was the number 1 draft pick in their year. So it's not that he's a bad hockey player and he's just found himself in this, place. He likes to be good at stuff, I think. But I also just think that for Ilya, it was probably an escape. Time away from his parents, or at least time away from his dad. Mom dies when he's 12. They get picked up when he's 18. The 6 years that he's working towards this thing are like probably an escape for him. And then getting picked up by the NHL or the MLH in this fictional universe, gives him an opportunity to escape his dad and his brother who don't like him and he doesn't like them. I think for Ilya, it's an escape, and it just happens to be an escape that he's good at and an escape that he, enjoys perhaps, but not in the same way that obviously Shane does. And so it's an immediate yes for him. Of course, I would give up, playing in Boston for Shane because I'm not as obsessed with it as Shane is. And so she says, loyalty is important, she being Yuna. And Shane goes, he's trying to be loyal to me. I just got like full body chills when he said that. And then he says to Ilya, my mom cares a little bit too much about hockey. And Ilya just takes it on the chin. He's just like, now I see where you get it from, right? Genetics. So, as all of this goes on, Shane starts freaking out. He gets overwhelmed, and Ilya immediately shifts gears. He's no longer worried about the parents. He's no longer worried about anything. He's just worried about getting Shane out of this. He knows that Shane is struggling with this. And so he says, like, your family's here. Your boyfriend is here. You're good here, okay? And Shane just, like, doesn't even hear anything else. He's like, boyfriend? Did you just call yourself my boyfriend? And he goes, I mean, yes, I think so, probably, right? And what I love is that Ilya pulls him in for a kiss. And Shane lets him. Shane just completely lets him. He melts into it. It's quick, it's very chaste. It's not, anything that's, for our dirty, slutty little minds. But he pulls him in for this kiss. And the tenderness of it, we get the parents' response to it, where she says, from their rookie year. And the dad goes, from before that. So you can see the way that Ilya can coax and the way that Ilya can soothe Shane in this moment proves to David and Yuna that these two are very serious. And so we get this kind of funny end scene where we understand, just through context that clearly they're going to have a real dinner with his parents. Again, get to know each other type of deal. And they're like, we'll be over around 5. And both Shane and Ilya are like, just text us. Text. Don't just come over. Text us. And she was like, why? And his dad's like, we will text. Make sure you're looking at your phone, right? Because earlier in the episode, when Ilya's in the water and Shane's sitting on the rock, he splashes Shane and Shane's like, what if I have my phone in my pocket? And Ilya's like, you don't. It's been on the table ringing all morning. We are supposed to be looking back on that and being like, that was David calling Shane to be like, I need to stop by your house to get my charger, and didn't hear it because he wasn't near his phone, right? So David's like, just have your phones on you and just check your phones. And then we get the credits, right? Season 1 is over. We know we're coming back for season 2. The credits roll and it's them driving away. Again, it's very, very warm light, but it's a couple of minutes maybe of the two of them driving together. We can't hear what they're saying. There's music playing over it. The credits are rolling over it, but we can see that they're talking. We can see that, they're holding hands. Shane at one point is kind of playing with Ilya's hair. Ilya's kind of playing with Shane's head and rubbing his head. And I could just watch a whole episode of this. I could watch an entire episode of these two people just doing mundane things. I could watch them driving together for an entire 42 minutes. And then at the very, very end, if you watch all the way through the credits, like I did, at the very, very end, you can tell, I'm going to say this very specifically, it is Hudson who grabs Ilya's face. It is not Shane. That is very much Hudson. They feel very distinct to me in my mind. And so I don't know if they just, said, hey, we're going to get a bunch of footage of you guys rolling around. But, I can't see. The way that it happened was so playful. And we've seen Shane grab Ilya's face, but in a very sexual way. Obviously, they've crossed a bridge where Shane feels a little bit more silly now. But to me, that felt like Hudson. Hudson grabbing, either Connor's face but grabbing Ilya's face. So anyway, that is the wrap. That is the wrap on this episode. So much for a quickie. Still pretty long episode. Maybe I should have called it a slay by slay. Let's crack open our burn book where we will look at the superlatives for this episode. The Bold and Bothered Award, which is strictly for the Femme and the Furious. It's a quote or a moment that really relays feminine rage. But we don't have a ton of that here. I just love the line though. Do you ever let dad win at cards? I would rather die. So there's our Bold and Bothered Award. The Shiro Award. This award goes to the baddie who is the most inspiring or the moment that is the most empowering. And for me, this was Yuna saying, please forgive me. I just thought that was so powerful as a parent to recognize your faults in a way where you realize that your son has been carrying this thing for nearly 10 years and that hasn't felt comfortable coming to you despite the fact that you're close. And so she's recognizing that there's a fault in the way that their relationship has unfolded and in that he has not felt safe to come forward and tell her this. And so please forgive me. I really loved the Femme Fatale Award for the most smash the patriarchy moment of the episode. And I thought this was from Scott's speech where he says, so while I share this honor with my coaches and teammates, I share it with you, Kip. I love you. Speak Your Truth trophy, the best quote or line from the episode, which is, I'm always thinking about this slow fucking hockey player with beautiful freckles and a weak backhand. And honorary heartthrob because I'm just a girl. Okay. And I want to talk about the most swoon-worthy moments. And I just thought it was when there's a lot in this episode. So there's no lack of things that we can pick for this particular episode of television. But I just thought it was when Ilya says your boyfriend is here and how their relationship is just crossed over into this space. So that's it. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Femme Furious. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends, post it on social media, all that good stuff. I will be back on Tuesday. We will be covering Shock Jock, which is Stranger Things Season 5, Episode 5. So we're just about halfway through the season, a little bit less than that at this point. So we'll be back on Tuesday talking about Stranger Things. And then next Friday, I've got a really fun interview coming out with a lovely woman called Lynn Harris, who runs Gold Comedy. So you'll hear all about that next week. And until then, just text before you come over.